Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. We're back. We're back after taking a week off, and of course, B. Scott, we had two podcasts dedicated to what would happen with the quarterback situation with the Indianapolis Colts, and then we decided to take a little bit of a hiatus, and of course it happens almost immediately afterwards. Carson Wentz traded to the Colts, so we're going to get into some of that today. Already covered a little bit on the MCT podcast, but we're going to give our take as well. Also going to get into some college sports today. NCAA Tournament's coming up. College football is back, as well as some news on that front as well. So a lot to get to tonight, B. Scott, but first of all, how was your weekend? How was your week away?
It was pretty good. It's been busy. Just working. Work.
I hear it.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm pulling double duty right now and working while I'm talking to you. I work and I can be a dad all at the same time. It's not easy, but it's just the way life is right now.
Well, see, you're the talent and the brains of the operation. I just kind of sit back and as someone for to be it's tough to do a podcast with one person. So you're the brains and the all the great talent, and then I'm just kind of here to make sure it's not just one person talking into a void. So I do what I can, but B. Scott, we know you put in a lot of hard work as well. So I feel you on the work front, though. It's just basically work, come home, repeat. That's pretty much a lot of.
As kids, didn't we go, I can't wait to be an adult. I can't wait to grow up. I'm like, man, I wish I could go back to being a kid.
Right.
I want that afternoon nap. I want, my highlight of my day to be that I got to play outside. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's starting to seem like that was a little bit of a scam. We thought it was going to be great, and then we're like, wait a minute. There
is actually a really great TikTok video of a guy that's doing like this clapping song about how bad it is, how we were scammed into being adults as kids.
Yeah,
it's great. I saw it. I forget what the name of it is, but great TikTok video, and the guy just put it.
Wait, B. Scott, are you on TikTok?
No, I am not on TikTok yet. I'm sure I will be here in the next few months or so.
I mean, you need to because
the nature of my job, but I'm not on Snapchat because I can't take selfies. People don't want to see snaps of right up my nose because that's how I use my phone. So,
the reason I ask about TikTok is that I've been basically curating personal For You pages for my friends because all I do is send people TikToks all day. So I mean, that's one of the benefits. I don't know if you want to really classify it as a benefit, but
I mean, I'm sure with the way work is going and all different directions pointing, I'm sure I'll be on TikTok in no time.
I mean, Jonathan Taylor has a TikTok. The Colts have a TikTok. I mean, there's a lot of good follows out there. So definitely don't want to sleep on it for too much longer because it is a lot of fun. But speaking of the Colts, we want to get into. We won't, like I said, we won't spend a whole lot on it because it is a couple weeks old. The MCT podcast has already touched on it a bit. Good job to those guys. If you want to go check out their take on it, it is on the YouTube channel. So go ahead and check that out. But yes, Carson Wentz was traded to the Indianapolis Colts. We speculated, we said who we thought might get the opportunity to become an Indianapolis Colt. Ends up being Carson Wentz. Wentz is traded to the Colts for a 2021 third-round pick and a conditional 2022 second-round pick that could turn into a first-rounder based on whether or not Wentz plays 75% of snaps, or if the Colts make the playoffs with Wentz playing 70% of snaps. And honestly, I mean, we looked into it. We talked about when Stafford got traded. The price was just super steep. It was talked about that it was going to be even greater to get Deshaun Watson. It was going to be there was a lot of worries on whether or not the Colts, what were the Colts going to do? We talked about it so many times about how the only kind of feasible option, knowing how Chris Ballard operates, knowing what's out there and the price for some of these guys, it seemed like, I guess it really is Jacob Eason season, but to be able to get Carson Wentz, on the basically being able to get Wentz for the price that you're able to get Carson Wentz. I mean, people have already talked about, and I believe him, Chris Ballard possibly, even trading back now to possibly regain that, third-round pick.
Such a Chris Ballard move.
Right, yeah. I'm like,
so possible, too. I mean, that's such a move that we have a topic coming up about what's next. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. I mean, seriously, this can we all just sit back now and just ooh and awe and marvel over Chris Ballard as a GM? I mean, he absolutely fleeced the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, this guy's got to be an amazing poker player just to sit there and say, this is what he said. He said, here's our offer. Here's an expiration date for this offer. Ball's in your court. And he just sat back, mic drop. Seriously. I mean, unreal to be able to the Eagles were asking for like what, 2 first-rounders and
a Stafford-like deal, which would have been 2 first-rounders, 2 second-rounders, and then like a player thrown in.
And then to not have to give up a first round this year. Obviously the 2022 second-round pick is conditional based off of playing time and different things like that could turn into a first. But I mean, oh my gosh, like, all right, here's a 3rd-round pick for this year and then a 2nd-round pick that could be a 1st-round pick in the future.
Yeah, and the thing is that, like, it's, because what we talked about when we broke down all the quarterbacks, we talked about, the thing that worries us about Wentz is his injury history. In 5 seasons, he's only played 16 games twice. So what's his injury situation going to look like? And I mean, they included that in the deal. Like, hey, you know what? You're trading us someone who's consistently injured, so we'll give you a better pick if he can stay healthy. But if he doesn't stay healthy, then that pick is a 2nd-round pick. I mean, they put in protections to guard against that possibility of him getting injured, which I love as well.
Not even just injury. If he comes out and plays like he did this year, they can bench him real quick and say, well, nope, there goes the 70. He's not going to hit the 70% now. He's, they really they protected themselves greatly in this. I mean, honestly, if Wentz pans out to be what, this team pans out to be what we expect it to be, then a 1st-round pick's not that big of a deal because you're picking in the late 20s anyways.
Right. So,
I mean, with the way Ballard works, I mean, he'll figure out a way to get an early 2nd-round pick or something. I don't know. I mean, he's masterful at maneuvering the trade or the draft picks around to work into his favor. So I think, honestly, I know a lot of people say, oh, B+ maybe, but based off of what could be the potential there and then what the Colts had to give up, I give it an A.
Absolutely. I mean,
not an A+.
But an A. Hey, I'll still take an A. And I mean,
I'd take a B+.
And looking back, I mean, Wentz reunites with Frank Reich in 2017. Carson Wentz was in MVP conversations. I mean, he had thrown for almost 3,300 yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He was first in the league in QBR, where he was his QBR was 78.5, which that was his career high. His 33 touchdowns were a career high. It was 2nd in the NFL. He was in MVP consideration before the injury, and the Eagles made the Super Bowl. And I mean, I was thinking about this on the way home from work today. You look at the 2 quarterbacks that were taken 1-2 in the 2016 draft, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz. Like, I think the perception is that Goff is better, but it's only because he physically stood on the field at the Super Bowl. Like, he
horrible.
Right. But you take everything, the fact that he was involved in his team's Super Bowl run, I feel like has given him the public perception of him being better than Carson Wentz, whereas Carson Wentz literally put his team in position to have that great run. I understand he wasn't there. I understand they were still able to win with Nick Foles, but at the same time, he was the reason they were the number 1 overall seed that year. Right. He was the reason why they were in a position to go to the Super Bowl and have the path that they had to take. So
you just got to look at the 2 different teams as time has gone on since both of their Super Bowl appearances.
Right.
The Rams have a really, really good defense. I mean, arguably one of the best defensive players in the NFL in Aaron Donald. That secondary is really a stout secondary. But that team is just mediocre outside of their defense. And Goff was nothing more than somebody just to kind of, stand back there and facilitate something, and nothing really moved, and it's not like he didn't have weapons. It's not like he didn't have an offensive line. But then you look at Carson Wentz and just how bad the Philadelphia Eagles got after their Super Bowl run. And it wasn't because of Wentz. I mean, yes, he's had injury issues, but how can a player that is coming back from an injury maintain his health when his offensive line is giving up the most sacks in the NFL? I mean, he got hit over and over and over again. If you look at his highlights, oh wow, Carson Wentz is a scramble. He's a running quarterback. Yeah, he's a running quarterback. He's a running for his life quarterback. I mean, that's the way he was played. And in those situations, you have to force the ball sometimes. And that's exactly what happened. Players just weren't. The offense just was bad. And I don't think it had anything to do with Wentz. I mean, some of it, yes, it did, because the quarterback can make the players around him seem better. I mean, but at the same time, if nobody else is hustling or putting up what they need to put up, you can't expect the quarterback to carry everything. So that's why I really do think Carson Wentz is going to be successful here in Indianapolis, because the offensive line, because the running game the Colts have. I can't say anything about what the wide receiver room is going to look like. Tight end should be, we don't know what that's going to potentially look like. But, there are the pieces there for both of those units. But just between a stellar defense, a stellar offensive line, with or without Anthony Costanzo, I mean, you still have Ryan Kelly, you still have Quentin Nelson. In my mind, that is two of the biggest pieces for a solid offensive line. And then you have this running game that is only going to get better. And that sets up a player like Carson Wentz to be successful. It puts him in a so much better situation than he was in Philadelphia. Philadelphia, they were expecting another Super Bowl run basically just from him, and not holding anybody else on the team accountable for it.
Well, I mean, let's take a look at what has happened since 2017. I mean, Frank Reich leaves for the Colts. The Eagles lost, right?
It's a lot bigger than people want to believe it is.
The Eagles lost their top two rushers from that Super Bowl run, LeGarrette Blount and Jay Ajayi. The only running back still on the team from that run is Corey Clement. And in that season, he ran for 321 yards and 4 touchdowns, so not a significant part of that roster. They lost 3 of their top 5 wide receivers from that season. Zach Ertz is still with the team. Alshon Jeffrey is still with the team, but Jeffrey,
not for long.
And Alshon Jeffrey, in 2 seasons, basically 2 seasons worth of games, 605 yards and 5 touchdowns in 17 games, so a shadow of his former self. So, the talent basically all leaves. His offensive line, like you mentioned, is deteriorated, going from first ranked to 19th ranked. Now, Wentz was 28th in QBR in 2020, but I mean, look, the kid's 28 years old. He's reuniting with his old offensive coordinator, and I'm confident Chris Ballard will put him in the best chance to succeed. He's going to have a great defense. He's going to have a great offensive line. Now, we'll see what the kind of weapons that they'll be able to put around him. But I think the crystal ball has gotten clearer. I think now that they've gotten Carson Wentz, they know their answer at quarterback, and and like I said, he's 28 years old. At maximum, it could be the ceiling for this is they have their guy for the next 10 to 15, however many years. They have their guy.
10 to 15.
15 is a little much. 40. He's not playing.
Yeah.
He's not playing until he's 43. But
he's not pulling a Tom Brady.
Next 10 to 12 years.
Even that, I would say next 8 to 10 years.
The next 8 to 27 years, the Colts have their guy.
Somewhere in the next century.
They have their guy for the next 37 years. It's incredible.
Don't worry about grabbing the quarterback in the future. Carson Wentz is your guy.
Yeah, for the rest of franchise history.
You hit the nail right on the head. I mean, the weapons are there. Obviously, we know Michael Pittman's going to be there. We know Jonathan Taylor's going to be there. We know Mo Alley Cox is going to be there. We can expect Paris Campbell to be back and healthy. This is probably going to be the best team Carson Wentz has been around since 2017. But one of the things people fail to look at when they look at Carson Wentz, and they go, well, he's broken. He's no good anymore. Well, look at the season that Phillip Rivers had prior to coming to the Indianapolis Colts. It looked like he was done, and he could have just walked away. He came to Indianapolis and had a career year for someone his age. I mean, he put up really good numbers. I think he had the highest QBR in his entire career this past season. So that speaks volumes to what Frank Reich is able to do, especially with a quarterback he already has a rapport build with, and a quarterback that trusts him to help him. Phillip Rivers was that way. Carson Wentz is that way. I mean, yes, there are some red flags with Carson Wentz. His attitude in the locker room. Reports broke out that he and Doug Peterson had not spoken to each other for nearly the last 10 weeks of the season. I mean, but at the same time, he has a different relationship with Frank Reich, and Peterson knew he was on his way out and probably burned a lot of bridges and everything. Then they're telling Carson, you're our guy, and then they go out in the second round and they draft Jalen Hurts. And you want your quarterback to be tough-minded and everything, but apparently that really, really knocked on the confidence of Carson Wentz, having to look over his shoulder. And that can be said when you are a team that's trying to run a 2-quarterback system. Neither quarterback plays up to their full potential because they're always looking over their shoulder of when they're going to be yanked for the other guy, and that makes them more likely to make mistakes. I mean, as a Purdue fan, we saw that for the longest time between Elijah Sindelar and David Blau until one went down with an injury. The other they didn't play as best as they could, and then once one went down with an injury, the healthy one played really well. It's psychological. So obviously, he's got Jacob Eason behind him here. Well, Jacob Eason's a backup. We know Jacob Eason's going to be the backup. Jacob Eason wasn't brought in to be Carson Wentz's replacement. We don't know what Jacob Eason is, whereas Jalen Hurts was brought in to be the replacement for Carson Wentz. And that type of stuff gets into a player's mind. So now he's not going to have to worry about that. He's going to be with a coach that he trusts and knows is going to help him get better. He's on probably the best team he's been on since his Super Bowl run. This is setting up nicely for Carson Wentz to have a rebound in his career. I can honestly say I think Carson Wentz could potentially be a top candidate for a comeback player of the year.
Hey, I think you're right on that point, and that was what I was going to say was kind of the minimum that you get out of this Carson Wentz trade is that you buy a little bit more time for Eason to develop if they think Eason's their guy, because that's the one thing I didn't want to see. I don't want to see that happen. I want to see Wentz succeed, but for whatever reason, if he does not, that was the one thing I didn't want to see with Jacob Eason, is see him be thrown into the starter's role on this team that has Super Bowl aspirations without having taken an NFL snap, whether it be a preseason or otherwise. So it's good to see that kind of plan in place, and I think everything else now is going to kind of fall into place, which is really nice to see. And speaking of that, you kind of want to know what's next for the Colts, what's kind of the next to look out for. I think now it's time to lock up some of these guys that are free agents and more specifically the guys on offense. It's time to lock up either T.Y. Hilton or Zach Pascal. It'd be great if it was both, but most likely one. It'd be great.
It's looking today, reports coming out, it does seem as though T.Y. Hilton is going to be moving on in free agency.
Yeah, I saw Pat McAfee had him going to the Buccaneers, which would be... Yeah,
there was reports, all of a sudden, people are saying if what it seems like happens with and Colts not re-signing T.Y., that must mean they are all in on a bigger target, hopefully Allen Robinson. That's what I'm seeing a lot of people talking about. So that could be interesting. And then T.Y. had that really cryptic tweet this evening, saying he's ready for free agency, and no matter where the Ghost lands, the Ghost is ready to work. So you wonder if it's a mutual thing or if they're just not they're far apart on any negotiations, or if TY is saying, hey, I do want to experience free agency. I have never experienced free agency, so let me see what's out there. And grass isn't always greener.
Right.
But
I think, honestly, I think that it's kind of a situation where, like, TY, I think, has been the guy. He's been the wide receiver, face of the face of the wide receiver group, face of the franchise, for a while now, as far as that goes. And I think, as it's one of those things to where, like, we talk about getting older. That's kind of one of the things you learn as you get older is that, hey, your favorite players aren't going to be on your favorite team, their entire career, especially nowadays. That feels old to say nowadays even, but nowadays you don't see guys being on the same team for, their entire career. And it's one of those things where
Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Joe Montana.
Yeah.
It's very, very rare.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you don't see the John Elway situations anymore.
Right. So, like, that's what I was going to say is that, like, hey, you know what? As much as I love T.Y., he may want a certain amount of money that the Colts are just like, hey, you know what? You're not the guy anymore. You're very injury prone. We need to, if you want to stay here, you're going to have to take some less money. And if he thinks he's worth more, hey, go get your bag. And at the same time, if he can go to a team like the Buccaneers who already have a lot of weapons and he doesn't have to be the guy and can just kind of, not take as many hits and maybe be a little bit healthier, then fine. More power to him. I hope he's successful. But yeah, the Colts need to lock up, these guys offensively, maybe Zach Pascal, Trey Burton, just because of the familiarity with Carson Wentz. I think he could do well. Then also I want to see him go get Marlon Mack as well, re-sign him. I think he's going to be on a 1 year.
I've heard rumors of Marlon Mack to the New York Giants to pair up with Saquon,
which would be interesting to watch.
Maria would be happy about that one.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that would be all right. I'm just interested to see. I mean, hey, if he can get some takers, I just figured that there wouldn't be a whole lot of suitors for Matt coming off the injury, and that's why I figured it would be really good for the Colts to go out and get him on a 1 year prove-it deal.
See, but I think Matt could get that 1 year prove-it deal from just about anybody. They know the talent's there. I mean, a freak injury of tearing your Achilles.
Right.
So how you were saying, like, Hilton may be offering Hilton a certain amount of money and he believes he can go out and get more. I'm worried. I don't think that as much. I mean, I think, yeah, maybe that's the case. The player that I'm most concerned about that happening with is Zach Pascal, and going out and somebody giving him an obscene amount of money to be a go-to guy and Zach Pascal falling flat on his face. That's the biggest one that concerns me the most, because he's a system type guy. I feel like Burton, I don't think is going to be back. I don't know. They utilized him so weirdly last year. I don't see them bringing him back. Honestly, I see them really shaking up the tight end position and making some moves there. I don't know how. I know a lot of people want to connect the Colts to Hunter Henry, but I think that's one to stay away from, because that could be a cash cow that ends up ultimately not performing to the highest expectations. Honestly, for me, the next move is find a way. Well, three things. One, find a way to acquire a third round pick, because the third round is a gold mine for Chris Ballard. So whether that means having to trade back in the first round and acquiring a third round pick, if you're going to acquire a third round pick, you're probably going to have to trade out of the first round and have somebody that's in the back, the higher end, or like the beginning of the second round, bump up to you, which is a strong possibility, because you got to realize those teams are also very, very, very needy for first round talent. But if I'm the Colts, I got to be very careful about that. I need to make sure that I know the right player is going to be there. So that brings me to point number 2 of things that what's next. Really, really evaluate these left tackles that are out there, or these tackles that are going to be out there. Don't jump to the gun and move Quentin Nelson to left tackle. I don't think that's the right move at all, and I don't think they're going to ultimately do that. But there are going to be a lot of options around 21 and then again farther on back at the left tackle position. I don't need to go into all of them again. I've gone over that ad nauseum here. But If a Christian Darrisaw is on the board at 21, you stay at 21, you lock him up. Obviously, that's a no-brainer. But if he's gone and Sam Cosmi's gone, you look to move back. And then, the Liam Eichenberg could be there. That you've also now picked up your third round, an additional third round as well. Point number 3 is, if you think you can get a solid left tackle in free agency or via another trade, there are some options out there for that. Obviously, one of the ones that some people are looking at are Andre Villanueva from Pittsburgh, who needs a change of scenery there. He is 32, but, it's one of those that he could be a really good stopgap for you to find your next guy. But point number 2 would be look at the weapons that are potentials. There is potential for like a wide receiver like Kadarius Toney to be available to you at 21, or if you trade back even. I know there are reports that the Colts did have a Zoom interview and draft type workout over Zoom with Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore would fit perfectly into a T.Y. Hilton type player, or kind of like really almost like a Naheem Hines, to be honest. A player that could line up all over the field for you. So those are the kind of the 3 things that the Colts need to do next. Look to see if you really want to acquire a 3rd round pick, what you need to do that. Look at the left tackle options, where you think you can get the best value and really lock somebody up. Or 3, look at the weapons potential and see what you can grab. Honestly, I know a lot of people want to give the Colts a pass rusher or a corner in the 1st round, but to be honest, the 2 biggest needs have to be left tackle and or wide receiver.
Yeah, those would be some good moves to see, and I'm very excited now. Like I said, I think seeing what now that the quarterback situation is solved, it'll be. I think everything's going to kind of clear up, and it gets me really excited about Colts football, to be honest. But with that, we're going to go ahead and shift gears to some NCAA basketball. But before we do, let's hear from our friends of the show. The Crash Course Podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Look no further than Anchor.fm. Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or mobile device, and will distribute it to other sites such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. On a budget, not only is Anchor completely free of charge, but will allow you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Anchor, it's everything you need in a podcast in one place.
Are you tired of your same old lunch hour of sitting and scrolling through your apps on your smartphone? Have you thought about playing a board game with your coworkers? Eat Lunch and Board Game is a podcast dedicated to telling you about board games that are great for lunchtime fun and some that are probably better saved for after work hours. I've been playing games at my office for over 4 years now, where I have made new friends and business connections that have been very useful. Board games build bridges.
Well, as you guys know, it is the first day of March. It is the first week of March, which means we're getting closer to March Madness, a very good time of the year, a very exciting time of the year. I mean, I guess the month of March we weren't deprived of last year, but March Madness we were deprived of last year, obviously.
Last March was mad.
Oh, yeah, it was mad. We were doing, fast food brackets and all that kind of thing to fill the void. It was a wild time. We're actually coming up. Obviously, a lot of anniversaries, lockdown, all that kind of stuff, we'd like to forget. But I remember the last podcast we recorded, that was, before everything happened, was the hey, who's going to win the Big Ten tournament? Who's going to do this and that, in tournament week? And we're getting close. That's actually going to be next week's podcast, is getting into the conference tournaments a little bit more as those get going. But we do have some NCAA tournament stuff to talk about. Of course, all the games are going to be in the state of Indiana this year. The sites that you're going to see, Mackey's going to host some games. Assembly Hall is going to host some games. Bankers Life, Hinkle, Lucas Oil Stadium, Indiana Farmers Coliseum, all the ones that you thought might get to host games. Of course, we were kind of hoping they would go to some notorious high school basketball gyms, because of the limited capacity anyway. But still, it's going to be a lot of fun. Very excited. But what we're going to get into and kind of examine most of all is the plans that the NCAA released. They're kind of COVID protocols, if you will, as we get closer and closer to the NCAA tournament.
They make my head hurt. They make my head hurt.
The NCAA will make a decision on replacement teams by March 16th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. This is less than 48 hours before the first four begins. After that deadline, any team with COVID issues preventing them from playing will forfeit. So, for instance, if you've got a Elite Eight game, between the number one and whatever, then if the number one seed, even if they're on a roll, whatever, there's not going to be any rescheduling for later on in the week or anything like that. Number one seed could be out of a tournament just by forfeit. Because I was reading some articles, Gonzaga, Baylor, a couple of the teams that have had, or that are locked, almost locked in as number one seeds have had their own COVID issues. So that's kind of a thing to look out for. If a team has to withdraw prior to the March 16th deadline, there are some protocols as well. For a one-bid league, the conference can designate a replacement team according to their own criteria. If it's before Selection Sunday, a new team will be seeded based on merit. If it's after Selection Sunday, a new team can be designated but must have negative tests for 7 days and will simply be placed on the bracket in the spot of the team that withdrew. So, for instance, if Akron is a 13 seed and they beat Ball State to win the MAC tournament, if Akron can't play, they would put Ball State in as a 13. If it's before the deadline, afterwards they probably have Ball State as a 16 because Ball State probably isn't going to win the conference tournament. So that would how it would be done for a one-bid league. If it's a multi-bid league like the Big Ten, like the ACC, the selection committee will rank the first four out. If a team withdraws after the bracket is published, those teams will be selected by rank as direct replacements for the team that withdrew. For instance, right now, according to bracketology from ESPN, which is a couple days old, there's been new rankings released and stuff, but based on that, Minnesota would be the first team out according to ESPN bracketology. If Gonzaga, who is projected as the number one overall seed, withdraws, Minnesota would take their place on the bracket as the number one seed. So reseeding would create a this is why I kind of understand it, because reseeding would create a disadvantage for all teams instead of a disadvantage for just the one or two teams. The team that's got to kind of get ready for a tournament game on the fly, and the other one that's been preparing for another opponent for a couple days now has to change course and prepare for a new opponent.
So I haven't been in, I don't know anything about any of this other than what you guys read and what I'm reading. My question is, let's say we get to the national championship game and one of the teams has to withdraw because somebody got COVID. If you get that far and somebody gets COVID, then I don't know what you did to get it.
Right.
But are we just going to have them pull out and then go, okay, Minnesota, you're the first one in. Congratulations. You're now playing for a national championship, and you were bad this year.
No. It's what would happen in that scenario is that there would be no NCAA tournament. There would be no championship game. Like, so if it's Virginia, Texas Tech, like it was a couple of years ago, the last tournament we actually had, which is crazy to think about, then it would just be, like, let's say Virginia had to withdraw, then Texas Tech is just your national champions.
Oh, okay.
So
you're
yeah.
still going to have a national champ.
Right. So, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense, because I thought it was, like, if somebody, like, has to withdraw during the Elite Eight.
No. There's
going to be a replacement. It's like, that's totally unfair.
Right. It's once the tournament starts, then it's all forfeits from there on out.
Okay.
So what would happen in that scenario? So if, like, Virginia, if Gonzaga is the one seed, then Minnesota would take their spot as the one seed. So then you would have a really tightly contested 16 versus 1. It'll make for a good trivia question in 20, 30 years. College kids are at a bar answering.
In 2021, this unranked horrible basketball team was a replacement number one seed and went on to win a national championship.
Well, and that's
who is Minnesota?
That's honestly what I kind of love about it, to be honest. I mean, obviously I don't love it the circumstances are not great for why these things are happening potentially, but on just a on the court, ruling and judgment, I like the idea of all the chaos. I mean, first of all, I think this is the right plan. I don't really know how else you could do it. I mean, I'd like to see them they don't have to reseed the entire bracket, but it'd be kind of nice to see them reseed the region at least, or reseed, because we've seen, like, for instance, with the NFL playoffs and that kind of thing, we've seen these teams get it together, rein it in once it got time to actually play for something. I mean, I know that kind of is crappy to say, but, like, we didn't see, throughout the entirety of the NFL playoffs, there were no teams that had to, do anything COVID related. And I think now, once you get closer to the tournament, especially once you get, like, conference tournament play, that's when these coaches will really be honing things in. Now, I don't know, are there really any colleges at all doing online, like, in-person classes, or is everybody still online for the most part? Or are there actually
Purdue
is doing in-person?
I think everybody's doing, a lot of people are doing, like, there's a lot of schools that are just doing, like, hybrid.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of classes offered just online, and there's also classes that are offered in person.
Right, which is why
We'll get Ball State Sports Link.
True. Well, the reason why I bring that up is because that's the kind of, like, could throw a wrench in the whole thing, is because you could take as many precautions as you want, but if you have a player, even not just a player, if your manager has, an in-person class and gets COVID,
well,
that's
I think it's very, very different with the athletes. I'm pretty sure they're kept within their bubbles and they're taking online classes.
That's what I was more
the
curious
same thing
about.
Goes with once you get to this tournament, if you have anybody that catches COVID once the tournament starts, there's going to be a lot of question marks and a lot of magnifying glasses on you as a program, because it's like there are so many fail-safes put in place. I mean, they're basically going to be in a bubble, almost a legitimate bubble for your entirety of your stay in the tournament. And I mean, it's going to be you're very rarely going to have any other interactions outside of your own team other than what happens on the court. So how did you catch it? Where did you catch it from? How did you get out?
How did you get out? Who let you out?
I don't know any other way to say it. But,
right, no. I just thought it was funny how you phrased it.
If you get to the tournament, I mean, you shouldn't be thinking about, I want to go out and experience the Indianapolis nightlife.
Well, it's kind of like that,
You're here to win a national championship, play for a national championship, win a national championship.
And
that's
I think
your focus.
Now, I think, and more or less it's going to be kind of a self-policing thing, too, in the sense that, like, I don't think players, like, the literal 12th man on the team doesn't want to screw it up for, the entirety of the program, the entirety of the team, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, they're also kids. I mean, you're telling me if we saw a UMBC over Virginia type upset in this year's tournament, you're telling me that, like, it would be out of the realm. I mean, I know you're not saying it, but I'm saying, like, you can't expect it to be out of the realm of possibility that they might go out and celebrate and then, oh no, we caught COVID, we have to forfeit now.
Well, you know what? The thing is, being here in Indianapolis with the NCAA right there, word's going to get out pretty quick that, hey, we were out last night out on Mass Ave or out on Georgia Street, and guess who we saw at Howl at the Moon, or guess who we saw at Kilroy's or Brothers? We saw the UMBC basketball team.
Right.
And guess what's going to happen then?
Yeah.
You can't adhere to the guidelines. I mean, let's be honest. I just don't see anything like that happening. You don't even see stuff like that truly happening even in the regular NCAA tournament, because it's not like, hey, we won this game, we don't have a game until next week. No, guess what?
Yeah, 2 days later, yeah.
Yeah, less than 2 days from now, you have another game. So you better rest up, prepare, and go play.
That's fair enough. That's a fair point.
There's no time for that type of stuff.
Right. And so, like I said, I think it's the right plan. It puts the pressure on the teams to make sure their affairs are in order. And I like the potential for chaos. I mean, without, as someone who just, watches the tournament and enjoys it for what it is, doesn't really usually have a team that I'm, Ball State's never in it. I don't know why I was going to say usually. They're never in it, since the early 90s. And then I'll watch, I root for Purdue and that kind of thing, but there's no team I'm like an avid, I'm going to avidly root for. So heck, I mean, I root for the story, root for the, and honestly, I'm rooting for the chaos, because there's a potential for a team that could go from being out to being in the Sweet 16 or further, depending on how things go. So, you could, we talked about Minnesota. You could have Minnesota get to play a 16 seed, which, theoretically that would still be an even matchup. You would have, a team that earned their way in and is good enough to be there as, against a team that kind of, would have been a 16 seed if they weren't, technically from a major conference. So you'd see, that kind of matchup there. And then, all they got to do is win one more game, and you have Minnesota in the Sweet 16, and depending on who they play, let's say they play, let's say the 9 seed beats the 8 seed, you have a 1 seed Minnesota versus, a 9 seed that's kind of middle of the road. Heck, you could see Minnesota in the Sweet 16. You could see a team theoretically go from being out, like for instance, on the bracketology that we pulled up, Michigan State's, out. We assume they're probably going to be in after their great week this past week. But Michigan State, you're telling me they can't go from being a team that's out to being a replacement team and winning the whole darn thing? I mean, that would be insane. Duke even.
We were talking about Duke off air. And, this is a team. I mean, the teams that are now pushing their way back onto the bubble are teams that we typically are talking about as 1 seeds.
Right. So, I like the propensity for chaos. I like the, the thought of it all. Like I said, obviously the circumstances that bring it up aren't the greatest. But I'm very excited to see what that can do. Now, as far as, after the tournament starts, it'd be almost, I don't know how you would be able to do it, but it'd almost be nice if a team that did have to forfeit due to COVID, the team that they beat got to replace them instead of just being a flat forfeit. But obviously, if it's something that's 2 days, you have a team that's already gone home and possibly putting themselves at a risk of getting COVID themselves. So I see why you can't do that. There's some ways it could be tweaked, but given the circumstances, there's not really a better way to do it than the way they already have. So I like the plan, and I like the possibility of chaos.
And you just got to look at it this way: we actually get to have a tournament.
Yes.
Overall, I think ultimately that's the ultimate goal, is to be able to have this tournament, not just for the fans, but it's, you have to have this tournament for the players.
Oh yeah, for sure. So that kind of brings us to the question that I was percolating, thinking on yesterday, which is which of the current first teams out have the best shot of making it out of the first round, and even out of the first weekend, maybe even, should they be a replacement team? Now, according to ESPN bracketology, again, it hasn't been updated from this past weekend, so I'm sure, once you guys are listening to this, there will be a different first 4. But here are some of the teams on the bubble, and you could even choose from a team that's not technically a first 4 out team, since it is going to possibly be different. But the first 4 out right now are Minnesota, Stanford, Richmond, Michigan State. For me, and I think, heck, by the time this gets out, they're probably going to be, one of the last 4 in. But should Michigan State stay on the bubble and stay on the outside looking in? I think they're a team right now with the biggest shot, I think, of if they were a replacement team making some waves in the NCAA tournament. They like I said before, they still could possibly make the tournament on their own. They have wins over number 5 Illinois and number 4 Ohio State recently. They play IU down the stretch, who is also projected in the last 4, possibly going to be on the last 4 out. With the coming bracket. And then they also finished with 2 games against number 3 Michigan, and a win in one or both of those games could potentially catapult them to being in the tournament. So that's a team that you could look out for. Richmond has their own COVID issues within the last month, so selection committee may be hesitant to put them, because that's another thing. If a team has a history of COVID, they could be possibly, might have normally in a normal year been put on the last four, been put on as a replacement team, although I guess in a normal year there wouldn't be replacement teams, but, would be on the last four out. But because of their own issues, I could see the committee being like, we're going to kind of steer away from you because we don't want to, we're inviting, could potentially be inviting a problem in. Stanford and Minnesota both on losing streaks. Duke is the fifth team out, and they've won 4 of their last 5, including a win over top 10 Virginia, so they could possibly be a replacement team. Like you said, there's some teams that are on the list of replacement teams that we're normally talking about as favorites to win the whole darn thing. So that makes it exciting in and of itself that you could potentially, it makes it more possible that you could see a replacement team do well because they're teams that we're used to seeing succeed come tournament time.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the Michigan States and the Dukes, and I think by the time we get to the tournament and everything, those teams will be in, even if they're playing in the first 4 in. Which would be so weird. Could you imagine Duke versus Michigan State in the first 4 in game?
Wasn't that like a kickoff game to start the year? Like, weren't they both? Because they're both like top 10 teams.
At least, one of the along those lines. But if I had to go from that list, I'm definitely saying Michigan State is the team that would be a replacement that could have the most success. Just pedigree and coaching. I mean, Tom Izzo. It's always hard to bet against Michigan State in the tournament. Let's just be honest. Either they go out there and they make the Final Four, the national championship game, or they go out there and they absolutely lay an egg and get bounced in the second round. So that's going to be an interesting way to look at things. But yeah, I think Michigan State's got the best bet out of that list of teams. I mean, obviously Minnesota is just falling apart. There are rumors that Richard Pitino at Minnesota is out and he's going to be allowed to coach out the rest of the season, but he will be out at the end of the season. That just shows you kind of how much of a dumpster fire Minnesota is right now. Like you said, Richmond's got their own issues with COVID. Stanford, I don't know. I don't pay attention to Stanford. Let's just be honest.
I mean, the Pac-12 as a conference is just irrelevant. I mean, you look at some of the other teams, like I'm looking at it right now, the bracketology that was last updated on the 26th. Duke is the 5th team. They could potentially be a replacement team. Georgia Tech, I mean, you're getting into, at this point, you're getting into the 9th, 10th, 11th best teams in the ACC. Which isn't great. Ole Miss is there, which I haven't really been, on the Ole Miss train. There's no teams that I'm super confident, like on this list of 8 teams, Utah State, Ole Miss, Duke, Georgia Tech, Minnesota, Stanford, Richmond, Michigan State. Besides Michigan State and Duke, there aren't really too many other teams, that I trust to get out of the first round, unless if UConn slips, back into a last 4 out, then maybe, or first 4 out, then maybe them. But yeah, I mean, the pickings are slim when you kind of look at some of these teams that could potentially be replacement teams as far as going on any sort of tournament run.
Yeah, the pickings are slim when you look at what's out there, but especially with the Pac-12.
Oh,
but, I'm excited for this NCAA tournament. I think now that there's going to be a allowed capacity of 25%, I can say this, I don't want people to get their hopes up that it's going to be just a bunch of random fans in there, because you got to look at the 25% of, okay, so these teams are given an allotment of tickets for each player. Let's say they're given 2 tickets for 2 parents, or however they seem fit to use those 2 tickets. Coaches get 2 tickets. So right there alone is potentially, like 40 some tickets. So there's 80 tickets right there alone. And you got to look at the capacity size of the building as well. I mean, obviously it's going to be more than 80. And honestly, the places that are going to have the first grab at the rest of those remaining tickets are going to be the schools themselves that are within it. So like if you're just an outsider fan, like, man, I'm hoping I get to go and see some good basketball and buy some tickets real quick. The likelihood of that is very, very slim because you got to go through all these lists. I mean, it's just like any other year. There's allotments that are given to specific groupings. All right. First allotment goes to the schools and the players. Second allotment goes to donors or whatever it may be, sponsors or whatever it may be. There's a hierarchy that you go through before you even allow a general allotment of tickets to go out to the general public. And that's every tournament. I mean, obviously why do you think it's so hard to come across the ticket for the Final Four? Because it's not like, all right, so this place holds this many people. Well, that's how many tickets they have to sell. Well, no, there's tickets that are sent to directed to different areas. And then the remaining from those areas are then released to the general public. I mean, that's just the way it always has been, but you got to look at it from now it's going to be a smaller size. So don't just expect like, hey, I'm going to go on StubHub like I did like I did in the last tournament for the Elite Eight. I went on StubHub and grabbed up some cheap tickets some Tennessee fans were selling and went, drove down to Louisville. Don't expect those type of situations to come up this year.
Yeah.
Just be grateful there's actually going to be a tournament and it's not going to be played in a silent arena.
Yeah, it's going to be, I'm very excited for the tournament this year. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Yes, thank goodness we've got a tournament this year. Yes. Before we get into our last topic here, which is some college football, we want to remind you that you can follow us at Crash Course FM on Twitter, Crash Course Podcast on Facebook and YouTube. The I can't even talk. The MCT podcast has been killing it lately. They've got 4 episodes up on the channel. They've been knocking it out of the park, so go ahead and check that out. There are YouTube exclusive podcasts, so make sure you go check them out. Remember that you can listen to us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. Also, come follow us on the Twitch channel, twitch.tv/3C Media. That's where we record every podcast live. So if you want to interact with us, that's the best way to do so as well. Also, real quick, again on YouTube, we have surpassed 25 subscribers. We're now at 26. So golf clap for the Crash Course Podcast here. So so thank you guys all for supporting, watching, listening, all the things that you guys do. So we want to get into some college football news, mainly because we can't go too long without talking football on the podcast.
Wait. It's been like 20 minutes since we talked football last.
Yeah, exactly. So we got to make sure we
a long time.
Yeah, exactly. We can't go too. I'm just saying it in general. Podcasts. We took a break to talk. Some racing, some college basketball. So it's like we got to get our football fixed in here. Right. First, we talked about the NCAA tournament or the NCAA video game a couple weeks ago on the podcast, so we want to give an update on that. 14 teams have opted out of the NCAA video game, and that's just for the time being, not permanently. But those teams are Air Force, Arizona State, Army, Clemson, Georgia State, Kentucky, Navy, New Mexico, Northwestern, Notre Dame, Pitt, Troy, Tulane, and USC. Obviously, some of those names you might say meh, but there are some heavy hitters there like Clemson, Notre Dame, USC. They are opting out until there is a rule change to allow players to be paid for their names and likenesses. So that's kind of just a notable thing to kind of take write down, jot down, and kind of keep track of. Because as far as if fans should be worried or not, I don't really think they should be, at least at the moment. EA's original plan was to use the players from these schools, or use the schools, but not any player likenesses. So now these schools are coming out and being like, no, if we want, if you're going to use us at all, we want the players to benefit. We don't want to just use the schools. Now Clemson and USC are a part of Madden's Face of the Franchise, so they are likely still going to be in the game because they already have agreements with EA. My only worry is that I'm not really well versed on how it would necessarily work, but my biggest fear with the new video game is the fact that EA's quality of game has kind of deteriorated over time. Since NCAA 14 came out, Madden has quickly declined as far as being a, I've said this on the podcast before. The last good Madden game was Madden 16, in my opinion, and that was when they introduced an actual mechanic where you could throw it into single coverage and actually sometimes get a reception out of it. And so which I didn't think was too much to ask for until I played games after that game was released and even before. So my only worry is that, getting something done could potentially cause a delay. And I think if you delay the game for too long, you're going to lose steam. Now, granted, I don't think, people have been waiting, 8, 9, potentially a decade, however long it takes to get this game out, to have this game be on the table in the first place. But still, we know how things work, with, the hype for stuff. There's some, I'm sure, casual fans that, aren't as into the game but are excited to have a college football game back that may not buy the game or may not be as hyped up for the game if it takes an extra year, 2, 3 years to come out, because we're still working on player likeness agreements and all that kind of stuff. Now, do I think that's going to be how it turns out? Probably not, but I just think that is my one worry, is that if it delays it, EA, like I said, my worry with the, worry with the game in general is EA's inability to kind of, handle things properly. And so that's kind of the worry that I have, that they may mishandle this in terms of trying to work out deals with these programs and with, getting these player likenesses taken care of.
So we're going to be, it's going to be Service Academy, Annapolis, Service Academy. I don't know.
Is it
the Evanston Wildcats?
the South Bend Irish.
I'm not concerned about this at all. Honestly, I believe EA kind of jumped the gun with announcing that they were going to bring the game back. I'm not surprised that schools are wanting to get more confirmation on what this new NIL is going to look like. That's a big topic of conversation for these schools in general. They want to figure out, what does this mean for us moving forward? What does it mean for our athletes? How do we handle this? There's a lot of questions that need to be clarified, especially now with this game coming out. Now, obviously, they have said they are not going to use any names or likenesses. It's going to be very, which nobody cares about. They want to make sure the graphics are good. It looks like you're playing at Clemson, and very randomized, kind of like what you currently see in Madden, the way they utilize certain schools as it is for the story mode, or whatever that is that they have now. It's all very randomized, and there's no way to connect any dots anywhere other than it's a Texas uniform, a Texas logo, it says Texas, all of that. So I think EA has a good blueprint in place, but I also understand the hesitance of these other schools of what the NIL situation is going to look like in regards to this game, because all they have to go off of is what it was like previously. It's like, well, previously you played with Purdue and you played with wide receiver number 4, who looked like, had the same stats and had the same measurements as a Rondale Moore. Well, that's different. But now I think it's going to be just so randomized that there's, you're going to have a bunch of, what it's going to end up being is you're going to have a bunch of ugly looking dudes that EA just randomized together. Because let's just be honest, those computer generated players are ugly as sin that EA puts together. So you're going to have a bunch of big uglies on the front line and the offensive line. They're going to live up to that name, literally. But I don't think this is going to reduce hype for this game. If anything, it's going to build it up, because EA is probably going to have to delay the release of this game. But you know what? I think fans of this game are so excited to know that it's at least in the works to come back, that, hey, we waited so long for this game. What's another few months? What's another year? It's not going to be delayed by like 5 years. We don't have to worry about that. This isn't going to end up having to come out on the PS6 by any means, because the NIL it's being worked through. Currently, And there's just a lot of moving parts. And I think EA needs to be a little bit more clear with these schools and saying, hey, this is what we'll show you what our plan is here. You know, I mean, all these schools know at this point is college football on EA Sports is coming back. And hey, I remember what it was last time. That's the game that really started this whole NIL conversation. So let's figure this out. And now I think everybody just needs to get on the same page. And I'm not worried about it at all.
Yeah,
I'm still excited for it, and I'll still be excited for it even if it gets delayed.
Right.
You know,
I think also these schools also recognize how, you know, like you said, the game is still popular today, and also the fact that there's a lot of, like, you know, we've talked about it before on the podcast. There are people that literally go and like create and update the rosters to be where you can upload them on the PS3 and have. You know, you can play with Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields in the game because they've updated the rosters. And there's now college football revamped where, you know, these guys have basically created, you know, a team of people have created basically updated graphics and stuff for the game as well. So I think you know, updated uniforms, that kind of thing. So I think that, you know, these schools also are taking into consideration the fact that more than likely, the player likenesses are going to be in the game anyway because they're going to have rosters that get updated and uploaded that people can just download and be able to use. You know, and the difference will be the difference. Also, I was going to say
that's one of those things where if people are going to take the time to do that, EA is not making any money off of that. Nobody's making any money off of
right, but I think that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying though, is that gives because of that, because the fact that no one will make money off of it, it's going to happen anyway. This is a chance for, you know, at minimum these schools to get some good PR, be like, hey, we want these players to get compensated because we know they're going to probably be in the game anyway.
Right.
You know, so that's what I was trying to get at, is because, you know, it'll be different even than the old game, because the old game, like you said, at least you had like it's wide receiver number 4. They upload these rosters with the actual name, so that's actually a little worse than it was in the past. But yeah, I think I mean, I don't know how big of a role that plays in it, but I think that's also something that they are considering as well, as like, hey, this game has such a hype, an online following, that people literally go out and make updated uniforms, updated graphics, updated rosters. Our players with their names and likenesses are going to be in the game, everyone's game most likely, regardless of whether or not, you know, it's a randomized roster initially. So that's all I'm saying on that.
Right.
So yeah, I'm interested to see what way it goes. Definitely still hyped for the game whenever it does end up coming out, although it's going to be probably a couple of years anyway. But one last thing before we go here, something I completely honestly forgot about, and that is spring football is here. I completely forgot about the FCS playing their...
because it doesn't usually happen in the spring.
Well, right. Well, and like... You know, it doesn't happen in the spring typically, and the fact that it's just been so long ago since, you know, we talked about anything related to the FCS, anything other than the power conferences, you know, and that kind of thing. I mean, originally it was going to be, you know, the MAC playing in the spring and, you know, all that stuff. Could you imagine, because there wouldn't have been bowl games, so could you imagine Ball State winning the MAC and then not getting a chance to go to a bowl game at all? That would have been nuts.
That would have been.
But yeah, so the FCS season started a couple of weeks ago, and I'm pretty excited about it. Like I said, I completely forgot about the season started. I'm excited for football. A part of me, you know, the part of me that's latched onto the XFL and could that possibly be a future development thing? Now my brain has moved off of that, and it is now like, hey, you know, could this be a like permanent thing where they put the, you know, FCS in the spring, get some, you know, highlighted draft hype for some players that you might not normally know? The only thing that kind of stinks is it's not super accessible. I mean, if you have ESPN Plus, good on you. You're going to be able to see a good chunk of the games. If not, very few games are on ESPN3, and that's pretty much it. You know, I was trying to find, you know, games this weekend to watch because I was really excited to watch games, and I couldn't really, you know, I don't know, this is probably just a technical issue. This is probably operator error on my part, but I even logged into my ESPN Plus, tried to watch it, and it was like, this game's not available in your area. I was like, wait, what? So it's probably something I don't know. I'll have to look into it a little bit more. But if it just thinks that it's not more accessible because I mean, and now I get why it can't be on like maybe ESPN2 or regular ESPN because you're conflicting with college basketball and all that kind of thing. But I'm just a little bummed.
It very rarely is it even on those channels to begin with.
Well, right, but you would think that like somewhere along the line, even like, I mean, you're telling me, I mean, I guess SEC Network has SEC basketball, but you're telling me that, you know, there's not two FCS schools that are in Alabama, Arkansas, you know,
you'll never see that. You will never, ever, ever see the SEC Network play host to anything other than SEC sports.
Well, right, but I mean, like,
because they have contract obligations. They're not going to say, well, hey, I mean, this school plays down south. Let's throw them on and get some ratings.
Right, but I mean,
because they would have to then pay that school.
I guess so, yeah. But I'm just trying to think of other
have contracts.
I'm just thinking of other ESPN affiliated, you know, networks. Like, I mean, ESPN well. But I'm saying to be more accessible, like ESPNU or something like that. ESPN.
Yeah. Well, also ESPNU does have contract obligations right now for other championships that are currently getting ready to kick off.
I gotcha.
We do. There's a lot of I mean, trust me, all this stuff has been gone over, and why?
Oh yeah. I mean, I know that they're not like sitting back there like, oh, well, we can't
ESPN executives don't just kick back and go, I think today we will broadcast this. And
right.
I mean, I never understood how much really went into this, and I still don't. But I know more now than I did a year ago, and it's unbelievable, the ins and outs of all these things, and negotiating like broadcast windows, and it's so in depth. It's unbelievable, and everybody wants to get the best for them.
Right.
Obviously.
Right. Yeah, I guess the what I'm getting at is I'm bummed I'm not able to have more access to it because I definitely want to watch. But you know,
I'll give you my ESPN Plus password.
No, like I said, I have ESPN Plus, but it wouldn't let me in. I gotta figure that out, and then maybe. But like, because we did the whole like, because we have Hulu.
You did the bundle.
Yeah, so
that's a great deal.
Right. So I went to log in because I was gonna watch. What was it? It was like North Dakota State or something. It wasn't this weekend's game, but it was like. I can't remember who it was. Anyway, I was trying to put it on because I was going to take a nap after work, and I just kind of wanted it on for background noise. And I went to go click on it, and it was like, this game is not available, like, in your package. And I was like, what? I have ESPN Plus as a part of the bundle, so I don't know what's going on with it. So I have to, like, do some more investigating and that kind of thing.
ESPN Plus sometimes likes to be screwy with you.
Yeah. So
I'll tell you the one I hate. I can't. I have to, and I've been trying to watch it a ton for what I do. I cover college wrestling, and trying to watch I was not able to watch probably the biggest conference championship this past weekend, or I'll watch like the ACC network. They had the duel of the year between Virginia Tech and NC State a few weeks ago. I'm unable to watch it because I do not pay the extra for the ACC network, which means I don't get the ACC network extra either. So I'm missing out on all of these things. And it's like, come on. I get the Pac-12 network, but I don't get the ACC network. Something seems wrong in this picture.
Yeah, that's a bummer. There's too many things now. Why are there so many things? But yeah, I'm just in general I'm excited that there's football and there's football to be played right now.
Yeah. Oh, I'm right there with you. I'm super excited about that. But you know, I know where you're going to go with this of why don't they just play the FCS in the spring anyways?
I know.
Sir, I want football year round.
Well, I'm just thinking of it for this.
How many of these guys actually end up getting drafted? There's quite a few that get drafted. And the draft just so happens to be right smack dab in the middle of the season.
It'll be at the end, right? It's like, because April, I think... Let's see. I have the team that, because we're gonna do a championship prediction. I have the team that I'm predicting to. Okay, so yeah, it goes through draft would be the FCC first round is the is when the draft will happen, because the draft is what, April 23rd to April 25th.
Yeah,
and that's the FCS first round. Right. Yeah.
I mean, obviously that could change, but probably not.
But I mean, they're not gonna be drafted and then immediately be asked to play.
Well, I mean, the thing is, though, I mean,
they gotta start getting into like OTAs. You have to
get prepared in different ways for the draft than you do for a season. You know, because
right.
So I think it all. Trust me, FCS needs to be held in the fall like it's supposed to be.
Right.
Trust me. There's a reason there's sports are designated to seasons for the sanity of the people that have to run those championships. Believe
True.
me.
True. Yeah.
We like to sleep too, and right now we don't get to do that.
Fair enough.
You're talking about this after work. I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, I would like just to be able to go to bed at night.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Just let me be selfish and have all the things I want.
And not think about the other
side. Yeah, no,
Trust me. I would say probably a little over a year ago, I would have been right there with you.
Right.
I would have been right there with you saying, yeah, why not? That's a great idea. I mean, it would be able to feature those players more than they get featured, and that'd be awesome. But now being on the other side of it, I'm like, no, please.
God, no, don't put it in the spring.
Trying to put all of the championship sports in at one time is not fun. It hurts my head. It really does.
Well, speaking of championships, I thought it'd be fun to do a championship prediction. Who we think will win the FCS this year? And my prediction is I'm gonna go with James Madison. I know it's a pretty common, high up pick, and it's basically one off of picking North Dakota State, who did lose this past weekend.
Hey, that was a big losing streak that got snapped.
Yeah,
big losing streak. But when you lose your starting quarterback and your starting left tackle.
Right, that's gonna do that to you. But
speaking of which, North Dakota State, Carson Wentz connection there. There is the chance the Colts bring back Joe Haeg.
Yeah.
And reconnect. Remember, because that was the last duo that came from North Dakota State that were big time players. Carson Wentz and Joe Haeg, and they could be back in Indianapolis together if Joe Haeg re-signs with the Colts.
True, very true.
Connecting the dots. Look at that. We just went full circle.
We went full circle on you. Yeah, James Madison, runners-up last season. They're ranked second this season. Finding stuff for FCS is hard. Like, I'm trying to find rankings, trying to find stats.
Oh, do you want to know where you can go find all of that?
You're going to say the NCAA website? Because I went there and it wasn't...
I'm going to say, go ahead and hop on Twitter. Go to NCAA FCS football. And I believe that's the handle. I better be right with that handle. But they do an excellent job over there with those types of things.
Well, there you go. So yeah, I may have to go follow them real quick after we're done with the podcast here. But yeah, they're ranked second in the FCS. They're averaging 44 points per game. They're 2-0 start to the season, so they're picking up right where they left off last year. They're usually a favorite to do well every year. They're playing some good football. And I feel confident. I feel confident once they get into the tournament, they'll kick it up into high gear like they always do. I'm going with James Madison as the winner of the FCS this year.
Oh, and the handle you're looking for is NCAA_FCS.
Okay, okie dokie.
So there you go.
Alrighty.
The number one thing right there, number one post right now, is about the North Dakota State loss to Southern Illinois.
Yeah, big loss, 39-game winning streak that the Bison
snapped SIU's 8-game losing streak to North Dakota State.
Wow.
So there you go. That's all I'm saying is if you. Oh, and there's also another one, FCS_stats.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go. That's all you need right there.
Because there's
types of things right there. All you gotta do is just do a little digging, and you can find whatever you want.
True. Well, because for instance, it was just, I don't know, it was hurting my head because I was like, there's some teams that played. There's some FCS teams that played in did play some fall games, but then still aren't playing in the spring. It's kind of it's unconventional. So some of the stuff I was finding,
this whole year is unconventional.
Right.
I mean, look at women's volleyball, for instance. It's been split into 2 seasons, literally. Some conferences played a few games, some games in the fall. Big Ten didn't play until now in the winter, spring, And then the conferences that did play in the fall are playing some more games now. It's whoa. Oh, and then get this one. This makes your head hurt even more. So if a sport was supposed to be played in the fall, their championships in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're being played now this spring. Well, it's going to be so. For instance, let's say volleyball. Volleyball will be played at the end of April, 2021, but it's going to be the 2020 national championship game.
That's wild.
Well, I mean that's right, for record books. It's basically the 2020. But
right.
Yeah. So I'm handling cross country here in a few weeks, and it's the 2020 cross country national championship. I got like, anytime I'm creating something for it, I have to remind myself that.
Right.
Like, oh, are you kidding me? I just figured out to write 2021 on everything, and now scrap all that logic, Brandon.
It's time to write 2020 on stuff again.
Yeah.
But do you have a prediction for?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go with James Madison too. I mean, it's early in the season, and you just got to go with what's familiar, especially at this weird season. I didn't think North Dakota State would be there because of you lose Trey Lance. That's a big loss, obviously. But James Madison is just consistently there. I mean, you got to give North Dakota State some time to figure out their quarterback situation, and they'll be back too. But I'm glad those players are getting to play. Like I said, same thing about the NCAA basketball tournament. I'm just excited that those players are going to get to play, and whatever comes of it, comes of it.
Well, that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast, episode 140. We're getting close to 150.
140.
Yeah.
What are we going to do for the 200th episode? Because that's going to be like, that's going to be in 2022.
Yeah, that's going to be next year sometime. Because so we'll peek behind the curtain. This is a guesstimation because we didn't keep track of the episodes, like what number of them the first few seasons. So I basically was like, hey, we went through, I think we got to episode, I think like in the 40s, 30s, by the end of last year. So I was like, okay, we've been doing it for 3 years. So we're about at like 130, whatever. And so when I started putting the episodes on the actual, podcast title and that kind of thing, that's when I was like, okay, we're roughly around this point because we've had, time off in different years. We've had, obviously last year we had more time off than normal because there wasn't a whole lot going on. So it's a rough estimate, but we're going with this is episode 140.
Sounds good to me.
But yeah, next week we'll be getting into some conference tournament type stuff. So we're really excited to get that underway. Remember, you can like us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Crash Course FM. So go subscribe to the YouTube channel. MCT Podcast is blown up. We're over 25 subscribers now. We're at 26. So go follow us or go subscribe to the YouTube channel, Crash Course Podcast. Remember, you can listen to us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. Also, go watch us on Twitch when we record live every week. Twitch.tv/3C Media. We're everywhere. What can I say? We got all kinds of handles. B. Scott, where can they find you?
You can the handle you can find me at is Brandon_Scott87. Haven't been on there very much as of late, but I'll be back on.
All right. Well, like I said, next week we're going to be talking about some college basketball. We're really excited about that. You won't want to miss that one. But until then, have a good week, everybody.